Hi, everybody. Um,
Hey, folks.
Dan, maybe you can manage the meeting if you've got the host creds today, because I'm on my phone right now, and it'll be a few minutes before I can get to my laptop. So I think I'm operating without the host setting right now.
Let me just relog in with the working group credentials so I can record the meeting. I'll be back in a minute.
All right.
I can do it, Dan. I can press record. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, I think record auto triggers, but I usually turn it off and back on to clip off the stuff before the warning announcement and things. So maybe you want to flip that, Kate.
Good. Here are the agenda notes. So
Actually, I don't have permission to record. I thought I logged in the right.
no, but it's already recording, so I think we're good. Huh?
Okay.
Yeah, okay, leave it. We'll just have to clip off the junk at the beginning.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it starts recording as soon as the first person arrives, so you end up with a bunch of minutes of dead time at the beginning. Okay, I don't have the agenda, but when I looked at it earlier this morning, there was nothing on it, which in our tradition doesn't mean that we cancel the meeting, but we just open it up for free-form discussion of whatever people want to chat about or came across recently that was interesting. And I don't know if he's on the call, but Brandon in the Slack mentioned some things that related to the white paper. I think I saw Frederick on here, and just to let them know, we did have a little bit of a discussion about the list we're compiling of the open source software that is related to Edge Native. And I want to thank you for the contributions on there. I think at this point, the number of things coming in per week has slowed down. For a while, we were getting a lot of them per week, and now it's a trickle, but it's time to classify those things. And I made some attempt to come up with a list of possible categories on one of the tabs of that spreadsheet. I think right now the categories are too big. It's like 20. I'd rather see it down to about 10, but it would require coming up with better categories to combine things. And I think over in the Eclipse Edge Native meeting a week ago, Robert had suggested, and he gave me a link to a document put out by the Eclipse Foundation for Edge that classified projects not on one axis, but on two, kind of based on, what it runs on and where it is, and maybe where in the sense of, far edge at the device level, low combined with low resource to running in mezzanine and public cloud. And I think that was an interesting concept that maybe as we attempt to classify these projects, we shouldn't confine our thinking to just one axis. Okay, I got my laptop back, so I'll be back in a moment. I'm gonna drop and rejoin on a different device.
Since we're doing more of an open discussion today, I've noticed some new faces. Maybe we can just go around and do some quick intros, and that itself might kick off some of the topics. I'll go ahead and just intro myself then. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate. I currently work at Fermion, which is a company focused on WebAssembly in the cloud. So creating serverless microservices and WebAssembly. Previously, I worked at Microsoft where I focused on the IoT Edge space, maintaining a project called Ocri, which is all about how Kubernetes interacts with small IoT devices. So I like any discussions around kind of the tiny edge and the WebAssembly space. I'll popcorn to you, Dehan.
Yeah. So I'm Dan. I'm working for Red Hat. Yeah, I'm one of the founder of the group, so been here for a while. I worked in Eclipse IoT space for quite a bit, working on a Red Hat sponsors Drog IoT project at the moment, and yeah, that's my whereabouts. Right to me is Joel. So Joel, want to go next?
Sure. Hey, I'm Joel Roberts. I'm an architect with Cisco Systems. So predominantly in my day job, I'm focused on the infrastructure or layer 2, 3, and 4 of the OSI stack, probably all the way up to the OS, where the virtualization begins, sometimes beyond, and have interest in everything. But the wheelhouse right now is predominantly in the infrastructure, routing and switching, as well as the connectivity to some of these remote sites or edge sites.
I can go
Am I
next.
supposed to pass this off now? Okay, I'll pass it to the Julio.
Hello, guys. My name is Julio Armenta. I work for Dish Wireless. I am part of the technology team. I'm responsible for virtualization, anything related to this topic. And Dish Wireless is building a cloud-native 5G network based on Kubernetes.
You're welcome, Julio.
Thank you.
All right, I will go then.
Just,
Hello, everyone. I'm Frédéric Desbiens with the Eclipse Foundation. So I manage there the IoT and edge computing programs. So I had the pleasure to work with Diane, and there are a few other names on this call I recognize. Anyway, so the Eclipse Foundation is a member of the CNCF, a member of LF Edge, and so we're trying to just, well, crossbreed our open source ecosystems, and I'm really happy to be here.
I can go next. So Andy Anderson with IBM Research, representing KCP Edge. We are a very small community. We're trying to get a little bit more momentum, and I've been attending these meetings here on and off for a few months now. So just trying to stay in touch with what the rest of the community is doing, especially in the area of IoT Edge.
Yeah, this is Victor Lu. I'm an independent consultant. Actually, I read one of the book about edge computing. That's why I'm here trying to understand. It's mostly Kubernetes, actually. So that's why I'm interested in what is involved, especially networking wise.
I guess I might as well speak also.
Yeah.
I'm also with IBM Research. And I've looked into this group a few times before, and I'm working also on problems of running Kubernetes clusters on the edge, mainly focused on the workload layer rather than the infrastructure layer, and currently pursuing it in the context of KCP, as I'm with those people that Andy mentioned.
So I think that's pretty much everyone. Rob and Wen, I think if you would like to introduce yourself, there's still time for that. But you're welcome to also sit it out.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Wen. I'm a program manager in Azure. I'm currently working on building a developer solution for building the Edge applications. I don't have any specific topic to discuss today, but I do have some related questions. I talked with Kate offline, but I will repost those questions in the bigger channel. Looking forward.
Hi, my name is Rob Woolley. I'm from Wind River, and I'm primarily interested in being able to connect all the things, everything from small microcontrollers all the way up to those large iron servers running managed Kubernetes.
Steve, we were just doing a round of introductions if you want to conclude us.
Give me 1 minute if you can, or
No worries. So I think there's obviously a lot of different interests here. I'm curious, maybe if when you mentioned you had some explicit questions, do you want to share those out with the group?
Sorry, my nanny is not at home right now. I'm with my infant, so probably have my plan for today is just for listening. I probably will post the questions in the channel if that's okay.
Okay, I guess I'll do an intro now. I finally got back up on my laptop with the camera functional. So I'm not quite a founder of the group like Dion, but I think I've gone back to pretty close to the founding. And I work at VMware as a software engineer. I'm got a role at VMware that isn't 100% edge aligned. It's just open source Kubernetes related. However, in my career, I have worked in IoT edge industrial control for decades, having done a startup in the field. So I moved from there to more corporate IT, but I became convinced that Kubernetes is a real opportunity to redo some of the legacy implementations that are in popular use for edge native, particularly in industrial control. So I joined this group and have been frequent participant since then. So I think we got all the intros.
Okay, I think the link Victor posted is his book, right? So it's a good resource, definitely.
By the book, are you talking about Frederick's book?
No, that's another one. I wasn't hyping my book here, but I can if you want.
So Steve mentioned your book last time, right? So you got a quick review on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And on our side in a community call, we provided excellent feedback for an eventual second revision for sure.
Yeah, you can mention the title, and I did bring it up, but maybe people missed it. My capsule summary was, we are compiling this list of edge native open source software. A lot of them are managed by the Eclipse Foundation. The book covers pretty much all the ones that are deemed current, and excellent coverage, and it's very fresh because this thing just came out in, what was it, February, I think, early February. So often the sell by date on tech publications and books in rapidly moving fields makes things you might find out there almost dangerous because they tell you things that become wrong. But this one, at least at this point in time, is very good.
Get it while it's still fresh.
Yeah, get it while it's fresh. And if there were faults, I'm sure they'll be fixed in version 2, but by design, if you even look at the title, I think it has the word Eclipse there. So some of the projects that are not under Eclipse, like that are under CNCF and things, are lightly covered or maybe not even mentioned. But hey, I think if you tried to do everything now that we have this list underway, you'd appreciate that would be maybe too much to take on. That spreadsheet we have now has 150 plus projects. But if you tried to keep up with a work like that, I think by the time you got through a third of it, trying to do the rest, the first third would be becoming obsolete already. So I think maybe that book is as good as it can be. From
an edge computing perspective, I should say that the edge computing chapter in there is probably one of the most less Eclipsey one, in the sense that Eclipse project are mentioned, but there's detailed coverage of Project Eve. We mentioned WebAssembly from a generic perspective. So things there are a bit less project oriented.
By the way, I transitioned devices, so you did mention some other book apparently. What is that? I sorry if I'm dragging this conversation back, but just wanted to make sure I understood what it was.
Victor shared a link to a book focused on 5G networks at the edge,
okay.
and was sharing it as a resource. And I believe that's an area that you're interested in, Victor.
Yeah, just in general, what is the networking solutions in this area for the edge cloud? Yeah.
Okay, would you mind dropping it in the chat again? Because when you join late, you missed
I
the
posted
earlier chat.
in the agenda doc, so
Okay, thanks.
just to reserve it for the future.
Victor, if you're looking for other people in the working group to kind of focus in on 5G on the edge, Brandon, who recently posted in the Slack, and Amar are from Arna Networks, and they're very much focused in on that area. And in the past, I've shared information along those lines with the working group.
Okay, thank you.
Well, this is the birds of a feather, so let's just throw it out there to things that you may have recently discovered that you found interesting and wanted to chat about. I think I threw one out recently, or did I, in the Slack channel on an article provocatively entitled Big Data is Dead. And I found that kind of it's a long read, but I found it really fascinating. And it's apparently by someone who at one time was involved with Google's big data business. And the point was that there was a period of time when the world was just fascinated by this concept of big data, gather everything you can, unleash analytics to go pull over this to discover things you might not have been aware of. And that if the article is to be believed, not too many people actually form these, maybe somewhat less got value out of this. And it goes into the costs associated with doing such a thing. And I think from my perspective, this article kind of portrayed it as maybe if you try to do this big data of gather everything you've got, put it together in a cloud hosted reservoir, that maybe you've got a hoarding problem because there are issues with paying for all of this storage. Obviously, you've got to pay for any analytics. There's privacy rules that mean that your cost isn't just to move it from where it came from and put it in this pool, but potentially because people have a right to be forgotten under certain, in certain venues with privacy regulations, that you may have to go there and be capable of finding things and purging it. Then if you're a big, what is often called a deep pockets enterprise, you might periodically get exposed to litigation where you'd be ordered to do searches of this. And at the end of the day, maybe these attempts are more trouble than they're worth. And the interesting things going on in Edge are that compared to the old world of big data, Hadoop circa the early 2000s, you've now got things like 4K 60 frame a second video cameras. And then you could potentially say that I'm going to gather everything we've got from every edge location, move it up and store it in the giant database in the cloud. But you have to ask yourself whether you really want to do that. And how this ties into Edge is that if you start looking skeptically at the idea of whether you really want to pull this, I think it leads to a scenario where you host more intelligence and apps out at the edge to filter this, clean it up, make deductions, maybe machine learning based out at the edge to greatly reduce the data, maybe all the way down to just very limited events that you could ship over something, like MQTT, and gather up centrally only what you need. Okay, I just saw a question coming in on what is meant by, in the chat, by what is meant.
Sorry, it was
by edge.
incomplete. I'm trying to type
Oh.
it again. I would just want to ask X1 for clarification. He asked, can our edge native principles be applied to apps running on medium and heavy edge as well? I was not sure whether he meant, I'm sorry, I haven't been paying close attention here. Does medium and heavy edge mean relatively high capacity nodes at the edge, or is he referring to intermediate vertices in some hierarchy?
Yeah, what I mean by, I can give you an example. For instance, HCI from Azure, we consider as a heavy edge solution. So that's basically from our lessons from customers. Some of our customers, they have like chain stores or like running the chain restaurants. In each of their store or restaurant, they will have a very mixed group of infrastructure. They will use IoT devices like sensors or cameras to collect the data. But due to the data privacy concern or some latency concern, they will also running some heavy edge or medium edge infrastructure inside the store to process the data collected from the sensors. But so my question is, because we have this white papers to guide the users, the developers, how to write what's the best practice for writing the edge applications. I'm wondering, for those applications which are not specifically running on the light edge devices like IoT devices, can we also apply the same principles to those workloads as well? Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I think a common, if I saw the words light edge heavy, to me, it would imply the amount of compute resource. And often what goes along with that is restrictions on the network resource as well. Although those are two orthogonal issues. It is possible to have a very heavyweight compute at an edge location, even something like rack mount servers, and still be challenged with regard to your internet access capability on poor network connections, maybe just because it's in a really rural location or even in a mobile vehicle or something like that. So I think it's important to keep those things separate. The other observation I've had, being in this group for 5+ years now, is that what constitutes being heavy versus light is not a constant. Compute has really, I think maybe the old thing of technically the Moore's law of more transistors per device is dead, but still even low power devices have gotten far more capable today versus 5 years ago. And this applies not just to traditional compute, but there are certain classes of, I'd almost call them edge native machine learning acceleration devices, so that what you have to be very careful of articles written 5 years ago on the best architecture for doing things, because things have really changed. 5 years ago, something like NVIDIA or Tensor chip was something you'd only be able to run in a large public cloud. You didn't have the power or dollar economic budget to put them at edge. And for those particular 5-year-old devices, you still don't, but there's new ones out there that are becoming pretty fascinating. I'll look it up and post it, drop the link in the chat, but as part of that effort of coming up with the edge native software spreadsheet list, I actually came across a very interesting open source project for doing machine learning on camera feeds out at edge to the point where people contend that this is runnable on Raspberry Pis, but doing full ML based identification of objects. And I'm reading this going, gee, I'm
slow down. Inferencing is different from learning.
Right.
Learning is much more expensive than inferencing. But your
Yeah.
general point is true, right? I want to make 2 points here. Power increases over time, generally. And as X1 was saying, depending on the scenario, you may have, very different amounts of power available, right? In a retail sort of setting, you may well have a small cluster of machines. You may have a rack in each store or location, whatever. That's perfectly plausible for running applications at the edge.
Yeah, so the project I was talking about is called Frigate. And what it does to pull this off is, I wasn't even aware of this device either. I just recently ordered one, and the backlog is months on these things, but I'm expecting to get mine in about a month. A device Google made called Coral that is not powerful enough to train a model, but it's specifically been optimized to run one. And they sell it in a USB key form factor or in these mini PCI Express cards. And they're low power, yet they are capable of keeping up with these camera streams. And maybe like I say, I've got an order in. I think they cost about $30, so not tremendously expensive either. When I get mine, I'll try it out and maybe report back to this group at some future date in a month or two after I check it out with my own hands.
And Steve Kilton at EdgeWorks had been using Coral boards in his AI-enabled cameras. So he deployed that with models in the field, and that's certainly, from his perspective at least, a good product.
Mm-hmm. And not to plug any vendor, I have no relation with the Coral devices. And like I say, I haven't even tried it myself yet. But I believe there are Jetsons out there that maybe are a little more capable than that, but perhaps also, more costly in terms of money or power budget. But this is one of these fields where I expect that the semiconductor people are investing heavily in R&D in this, and it is going to change. And I think that the net effect of all of this research going on in the world is that the pendulum maybe is moving for some of these applications in data analysis to move from public cloud out to edge locations to both offer better data security and privacy. In other words, don't ship the data. Every time you ship the data to another location, it's another vector for hackers to get at it, tamper with it, steal it, whatever. Keeping it only where it's needed probably would be a great idea. And if you can get this advanced capability, this might be a good way to do it.
But I would add to the question. So I think the principles are basically good, applied well to the medium heavy and heavy edge, right? It's questionable whether you can apply them to the light edge, but this is where they would be applied, right? So just to answer the question.
I think they can also be applied to the light edge. I think it was the tiny edge, and I know this gets into our whole what is everything called. But I think when you're writing it, we said tiny edge is where we're not really talking about, because we're talking about the compute that's interacting with those devices. If we define tiny edge as sensors, MCU class devices, but I agree with what Dehan said. I think it can be heavy edge. I think you have more freedom with the more compute that you have. So obviously you have to be less resource aware if you have more compute resources, or you probably, like Steve said, have to be less aware of variable connectivity because you have probably a more reliable network with larger devices and fewer devices. assuming larger equals fewer.
Yeah, maybe the good idea for some future revision of this would be to maybe categorize the principles based on the heaviness of the edge. So what's more important on the heavy side, what's more important when you're going to the medium and light edges or something like that.
Yeah, I would say based on our customer conversations, yes, the heavy edge does provide more compute resource. But for the networking issue, I would say almost 90% of our customers have the networking issues because they have thousands of stores running in the different locations. And sometimes they will have some like very bad weather conditions, or I don't know, some other issues make them accessible to the networks. So they are looking for such a solutions to help them to solve the networking issues.
And when you're talking about solutions to solve networking issues, are you talking about how do we recover from this downtime, things like store and forward? Is that the issue?
I think they probably are looking for like the end-to-end solution, like, how do they recover immediately from the downtime issues? Or maybe I'm just making up, maybe when they designing the applications, should they consider how to cache their data? So what they want is when this networking failures happens, they still can, each store or in each location can still operate normally. So, yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. Right. I know, just as a retail customer, I notice occasionally various outlets around me, they have a single network connection and sometimes it's down and they can't process credit cards. So, the edge native principles need to include, being able to operate while disconnected from the WAN.
Yeah, exactly.
And to clarify, would you say that, so I just wanted to check with Mike here, do you think a principle of being aware of variable connectivity fulfills that need? Or do you think there's a need for a principle that explicitly calls out aware of no connectivity? We were thinking about a variable as being a catch-all for that, but it sounds like something more explicit is something you would favor.
Well, I would say, first off, one of the questions I think about platform and applications. So there's a division of responsibilities question. So I'm trying to work on platforms that, to the degree possible, support applications through interfaces that the interface does not demand online connectivity. The interface is state-based, and so the implementation can either be online or not, and the application doesn't need to know. But in general, I suppose there are situations where the application will need to know. But I would say that, first thing is just to note, in general, in edge computing, you can't assume the connectivity is constant. You can't assume that it's good.
And I think one of the implementation recommendations we give for that is focus on pull-based mechanisms. So where your edge pulls from your control plane rather than your control plane pushing to your edge, because only your edge knows when it's available. So
there's two different issues, right? Pull versus push is different from, can you expect to pull at any time? Can you expect to pull at full rate at any time? Right. So I think there are two different issues. I think the pull versus push is more a matter of, stuff like typical arrangements of firewalls, who can succeed to open a TCP connection. And yes, it's often arranged such that it's easier for the edge to open a TCP connection to the center than vice versa. But that's different from, online or not.
I see them as similar, but I think this is purely semantics. I think you can get into a lot of details with what does the word pull versus push mean for people. But what I was trying to say there with that terminology is, I think having the edge fetch information from the cloud is a better model than having the cloud have a cron fetch to the edge, where the cloud never knows if the edge is going to be available or not. But I know pull and push is a kind of a overloaded term. So there's also so many nuances we can get there. And I think that those are also other really good points with other ways we can think about it.
I guess it also depends on the semantics of the communication. Is it like a control from the cloud to the edge, or sending data from the edge to the cloud? And both of those have different problems depending on the problems with the connectivity and the appropriate solutions. So if you're ready for the next topic, maybe Andy can give us an update on the KCP Edge.
Yeah, hi, everybody. So yeah, as Mike had mentioned, we're working on edge-related concerns for KCP, which is a sub-project, or it's a fork of Kubernetes. And so we are a fork of KCP. And what we've been doing so far is we've been validating our assumptions and some of the areas that we're exploring. So I just wanted to give you an update as to where we are today. We've made a couple of efforts in the way of awareness where we've reached out to others. We've got a blog set and a coding milestone that's out there now. And I'm just sharing that with you now. We're working on a set of initiatives and elements for a proof of concept that will be showing off at the end of March. And I thought it would be useful for you to see that information, as well as we're starting to build a Medium blog post depot, so to speak, for curated information about KCP Edge and KCP, which I just dropped in there as well. Let's see what else I can give you.
Andy,
So I thought I'd update you there. So some of the things that we're working on for this proof of concept, we're working on an edge scheduler and a placement translator. We've got some, we're working on the design of a status summarizer. And so that's to be able to summarize status from the lowest layers in an edge location, in a hierarchy, a spoke, as we refer to it. And so that we don't overwhelm the hub site with millions of different status messages when they can be summarized. And we're also working on a workload management and an inventory management component that can be used to drive some of the use cases that we think are viable. We're tracking use cases in telco, agriculture, space, and aeronautics. With we're working with the European Space Agency. We've started talking with Chick-fil-A. So in the fast food area, we've also done work there too. So sure, I can recap that. I don't have the ability to share right now, but if you would allow me to, I can show you my screen as to what I'm looking on. And Mike, feel free to chime in as you feel necessary.
yeah, I'm not logged in as the host, so I can't
Oh, right.
transition it to you, but if somebody else, if Kate or Dion can.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody is at the moment, right? Give me just a sec. Maybe I would be able to claim.
Yeah, so if you want to follow along, if you just click the link in the chat and scroll down to the areas of exploration. So we've got in Kubernetes, they've got this notion of being able to service a deployment, send a deployment down so that it can work on any given node, but that does not include all nodes. So what we think
Andy, were you speaking of TMC?
I'm talking about Kubernetes in general and TMC as an extension of that. Mike, would you like to explain the exploration?
Well, yeah,
Go for it.
I think what you were saying was specific to TMC. If you think about sending, Kubernetes doesn't send, right? In Kubernetes, you've got one cluster that holds the workload description and runs the workload.
Yeah, Mike, explain the areas of exploration. You can certainly do that.
Okay, so yeah, as I was alluding to before, I'm looking specifically at what we've defined as the edge multi-cluster problem. So it's focused on workload, and this is meant to include things sometimes called policy, running in Kubernetes clusters on the edge. Let's see, have I really actually closed that dang thing? A list. Here it
Everybody
is.
has a
Got
link
it.
in front of them, Mike, right now. They have the Edge MC up, and I was going
Okay.
over the areas of exploration. That's listed
Right.
at the bottom of that screen. Nobody has the
Yes.
ability to host any or share anything at this time.
Got it. Right. So I haven't had time, Andy, to carefully compare the list of investigations on that page with the list of problems in the blog post I'm editing. So I was going to review the list of problems in the blog post that I'm working on. And I was kind of context setting. So as I said, we're looking at specifically the issues of making a platform that can help with organizations doing edge computing, where they want to run applications on Kubernetes clusters at the edge. And so the problems that arise are first was we've been alluding to. So I take it as a given that these applications are going to run on a kube cluster. Now that can be a single machine, or it can be several machines, depending on the actual scenario at hand. Right, there are kube distributions that are engineered to run on relatively low resource machines, but it doesn't have to be that way. Chick-fil-A, as you mentioned, for example, has a cluster of 3 physical machines in each restaurant. Another facet of the problem is cluster scoped API objects. So for example, in the TMC, which is Transparent Multi-Cluster project in KCP, they've defined a different kind of multi-cluster problem. They call it transparent multi-cluster. And in transparent multi-cluster, a workload is something that appears in one Kubernetes namespace. But we believe in general, workloads are not so confined. We need to be able to handle cluster scoped API objects as well. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a need to support a general hierarchy, right? As was touched on earlier, you can't expect to transfer all the data back to the center. You don't always want to. It's not always feasible. You have to do some processing. It may not, and it may not be as simple as center and edge. You may have intermediate levels of hierarchy, right? I mean, you talk about the telco doing 5G, right? They've got a lot of different intermediate levels of data center and so on in their hierarchy. So edge computing in general is more than 2 layers. It's not just center and edge. There's intermediate stuff as well. Also, we touched on the need for each edge location to be self-sufficient. And by location, I really mean that boundary, that's sort of the lowest useful boundary for management here. In the case, so it may be a restaurant with a cluster of 3 machines. It may be 1 machine, whatever. It's the lowest layer of the hierarchy where you have it's a real boundary in terms mainly of communication. You may have regulatory or data sovereignty issues as well as communication issues, but you want to have each edge location self-sufficient. And again, this is a distinction from TMC, although again, I don't know how many of you people are familiar with TMC. Another one is that there's a complex arrangement of roles and responsibilities. Right. If you look at a lot of the Kubernetes world, it's focused on the DevOps paradigm or a development plus SRE division. But in Edge, it gets much more complicated than that, particularly when you have a non-trivial hierarchy. Right. Consider, for example, a manufacturing operation that's got several plants. There may be a central engineering team that is, importing, qualifying, integrating, creating software. But it's at the individual plant level that it gets configured. Updates get batched into local maintenance windows, and so on. So it's not just, one guy or one team in charge of making all the decisions. There's a one-to-many relationship, again, unlike ordinary Kubernetes, right, between workload description and running copies. We want many running copies given one workload description. And this has lots of implications, which I'm not going to try to summarize. It does call out a lot of implications. And then the other is another one is again a large number of edge clusters. We do want to be able to handle use cases with a large number of edge clusters, and that makes some simple and obvious solutions to the other problems infeasible. So for example, in the Kubernetes world, you may be familiar with the so-called customized with a K technology. So one of the things you need when you have multiple copies is generally you need to be able to customize the workload for each destination, but you wouldn't want to maintain a customized with K prescription for each location, because that's just infeasibly tedious. You need pattern-based descriptions of how to customize. And that's just one example. So anyway,
Hey, Mike,
that's my summary.
sorry for interrupting, Mike, and you're now co-host. So if you want to share
Thank you.
screen.
Thank you,
it's
Tijun.
doable.
Now, Mike, a quick question too. You dropped the acronym, I think TMC. I was wondering what that stood for.
Yes, that's transparent multi-cluster. That's something that they're also doing in the KCP project.
Okay, thanks.
Is the KCP project under the umbrella of the CNCF or some other organization?
You know, I'm not entirely sure about that, Andy. Do you know?
I think KCP is attempting to be incorporated in the CNCF, but I don't know that they've made it yet. I believe it was, though, an activity that was underway. I'll have to check up and get back to you.
So I have a question on the TMC, transparent multi-cluster. Is the main challenge there is the multi-tenancy? Because you were talking about namespace and not being, I mean, workloads not being confined to namespaces.
So I would describe,
is that the challenge?
well, I would describe the goal of TMC is really to support a service that gives, it's a multi-tenant service where each user has the illusion of they have their own Kubernetes cluster, but in fact, the implementation is much cheaper. What they've done, one of the things they've done is they've introduced a higher level of virtualization in the API server. So above namespaces, they have something you might call super namespaces. They call them logical clusters, but they're not full clusters. They're really just an extra level of division of the objects within an API server and with correspondingly in the storage. But then what the TMC, so there's layers. That's kind of one of the lowest layers in KCP. Above that, they've built something called transparent multi-cluster, which is about, okay, you put the workload description in the KCP server, but that's not actually where the workload runs. The workload runs in back-end compute clusters that are regular Kubernetes clusters. And transparent multi-cluster is about transporting desired state and reported state back and forth between the KCP logical clusters and the back-end compute clusters, so that each user who's looking at just one logical cluster in KCP has the illusion that they're using a regular Kubernetes cluster of their own.
Okay, so besides the illusion of having their own Kubernetes, is it completely safe and secure? I mean,
No, it's not
isolated.
It's not a complete isolation.
Okay.
And in fact, this is one of the issues. We'd like to get upstream into regular Kubernetes, this additional level of virtualization. But if we sell it as multi-tenancy or complete isolation, that's just not going to go, because it's not true. But I think for this use case and others, the idea of an extra level of virtualization is useful. And I would like to see that make it into plain Kubernetes.
Yeah, understood. The reason I'm asking is, I mean, I work for Dish and we are looking at multi-tenancy situation in Kubernetes. And the answer we always get is namespaces, but that's not completely separation between users, right?
Right, indeed. And there is, in part because in Kubernetes, there's things that are not, there are objects that are not namespace scoped, they're cluster scoped. So this extra level of virtualization solves that problem. So with the KCP logical clusters, each logical cluster has its own set of CRDs, for example, its own set of API resources, okay? But it's still one server. So you can still have, performance interactions between users of that server. And so, it would be a mistake to try to sell it as complete isolation. So that's that.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
I'm reading your quick start guide right now. Looks like pretty straightforward to get going. What's the best way to get involved? Is there a mailing list or something where people are talking?
Yes, actually, we're on the KCP-dev channel over in the Kubernetes Slack. And the community meeting happens, our next community meeting, we're bi-weekly, will be on tomorrow morning. So if you'd like to, we can rope you in there. There's a Google Calendar connected at the bottom of that Edge MC. Let me share now. I guess now is appropriate. Let me see if I can get my Safari. There it is. Okay. So right, so we've got a docs KCP Edge.io, and of course, then there's our repo. And at the bottom of the README in the repo, you'll see there is a community calendar in Google that you can connect to and get our contact info. If that's not sufficient, then feel free to Slack me in KCP Dev. And here we go, KCP Dev. And I'll be happy to respond with, a link to an invite or anything else. And that's where we hang out.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob, for your interest.
Yeah, I'm also interested, so I'll follow the link. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all I had. Thank you very much for the floor and the opportunity.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone else have anything they want to bring up? Just jump in if you do. In the meantime, a couple conference reminders. The Kubernetes on the Edge days submits came in very strong. The program committee is still going over those to come up with a schedule, but it looks like that's going to be a really nice conference going on in Europe in April. Another reminder that the Scale conference in the Los Angeles area is coming up in mid-March. A few of us on this call are going to be speaking there, but there is a fair amount of Edge-related content there, as well as a lot of Kubernetes content. Does anybody have any ideas for things they would like for the next meeting of this group, either a subject to be discussed or someone that, we can try to recruit as a speaker for a topic you're interested in? Okay, well, if you think of anything offline, put it in the Slack channel for this group, or DM one of the organizers. Either one will work.
Yeah, I will miss the next one. I will be on my way to Pasadena.
Okay, we're about 5 minutes before the hour, but if nobody's got anything, we can just end this a little bit early today. Okay, I'll take silence as that's it. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Take care.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.